At 62, Melissa Gilbert is living through her most turbulent chapter yet. Melissa Gilbert built her public identity on a fictional 19th-century Prairie family, but her real family history has always been far stranger and far more painful than anything scripted for Little House on the Prairie. Now, at 62, she's navigating a stretch of life that includes a startling new family discovery, the collapse of a long-standing TV role, a major relocation, and most seriously, a criminal case against her husband that has upended everything she and he had built together. A childhood built on a hidden truth. Gilbert was adopted as a newborn and raised in a Hollywood household with actor Paul Gilbert as her father. For much of her early life, she understood that he had died of a stroke. That explanation held until she eventually learned the real cause: he had taken his own life. The revised truth landed hard, and by her own account it triggered a prolonged period of disrupted eating and sleep as she processed grief she hadn't known she was carrying in the first place. The instability didn't stop there. Her parents split when she was 6, and her mother's remarriage reshaped the household again, adding new relatives and new dynamics to a family that already looked, from the outside, far more put together than it felt from the inside. To the public, she was a smiling child star. Privately, she was managing the fallout of adoption, divorce, a concealed suicide, and the particular pressure of growing up under constant observation. An unexpected discovery: 3 brothers. Decades later, genealogy technology handed Gilbert a plot twist she never anticipated. In July 2026, she announced on social media that she'd connected with a distant cousin through a DNA matching app, and that connection eventually traced back to siblings on her birth mother's side she never knew existed: 2 living brothers, Matt and Laird, and a third, Mark, who had already died. Gilbert described the experience warmly, saying she and Matt in particular were growing close quickly, and joked that her sense of her own family tree had transformed from something sparse into something sprawling. She used the image of a modest shrub turning into a climbing rose vine. She's also indicated that the full story behind how she and her newfound brothers came to be separated at birth is unusually dramatic, and that she plans to share more of it eventually. This isn't Gilbert's first experience of discovering unknown relatives. Years earlier, she located half-siblings on her birth father's side, but by her own description those relationships never became close and remained complicated by secrecy, a disappointing contrast to what she's now finding with Matt and Laird. Her brother Matt has been similarly candid about the surprise, describing the past several weeks as an unplanned and emotional crash course in a family history he never knew he had, filled with new questions and a person he's only just met but somehow already feels connected to. The allegations against her husband. The joy of that discovery arrived in the middle of the hardest period of Gilbert's adult life. Her husband of 13 years, actor Timothy Busfield, was arrested in New Mexico in January 2026. The arrest stemmed from accusations made by 2 11-year-old twin boys connected to the set of the Fox series The Cleaning Lady, who alleged sexual abuse. Not long after, a grand jury returned an indictment against Busfield on 4 counts of criminal sexual contact with a minor. In the aftermath, older allegations from the 1990s and 2010s also resurfaced publicly. The news landed with particular force given the life Gilbert and Busfield had been quietly building. The couple had left Los Angeles behind for a restored, 14-acre property in New York's Catskill Mountains, a rural retreat that had, for years, functioned as something like a redemption story for Gilbert, a former child star reinventing herself far from the industry that shaped her early life. That narrative was thrown into chaos overnight. Gilbert didn't stay silent for long. In April 2026, she gave her first interview since the arrest, appearing on Good Morning America. Despite reportedly being counseled by lawyers to hold back, she chose to speak directly to the allegations, telling the interviewer she believed Busfield was incapable of harming a child and that she trusted him completely with her own children. She said she had heard his account of events, one the public hadn't been given access to, and described herself as fully confident that he would ultimately be cleared. "Our life as we knew it is done." Gilbert has not tried to minimize what the case has already cost them, even while maintaining her belief in her husband's innocence. In a conversation with George Stephanopoulos, she spoke plainly about the scale of the loss, not just professionally, but personally, describing it as the end of the future they had planned together, project by project, dream by dream. She's been especially blunt about how she expects the public and the industry to treat Busfield going forward, saying that regardless of the case's outcome, she believes he will always carry the stigma of the accusations, professionally finished even if legally exonerated. Busfield himself echoed that sentiment in grand jury testimony given in February 2026, saying he considered his career effectively over, citing lost television roles, a project that had already digitally removed him, and the loss of his talent representation, all attributable, in his view, to the fear the allegations had created around him, independent of any legal outcome. Career fallout reaches Gilbert directly. The professional consequences haven't been limited to Busfield. On July 16, 2026, Gilbert announced she would not return for the 14th season of Hallmark Channel's When Calls the Heart, a show on which she had appeared in 7 episodes across 2 seasons in the role of Georgie McGill. She broke the news on Instagram, telling followers she'd been informed the decision came down to budget constraints. Hallmark's response was notably narrow. A representative confirmed only that Gilbert's storyline had concluded as scripted in season 13, adding that the network valued its collaborations with her. Gilbert's own announcement made no mention of her husband's legal situation, but the timing, arriving roughly 6 months after his arrest, was hard for observers to read as coincidental. Leaving Manhattan, returning upstate. Amid the legal and professional strain, Gilbert has also made a significant change to her living situation. In June 2026, she announced she was giving up the Upper West Side apartment she had kept for 8 years and relocating full-time to the Catskills property she shares with Busfield. She shared the news with characteristic candor on Instagram, posting images of moving boxes and a now empty apartment, telling followers she expected to eventually return to the city but that circumstances currently called for a different arrangement. That upstate home has functioned as more than just real estate for Gilbert. She purchased the property with Busfield in 2018 specifically to build the kind of quiet, unglamorous life she said she'd always wanted, one she contrasted directly with the manufactured version of stardom she experienced during her Little House on the Prairie years. In interviews going back to 2022, she's described the move as part of a broader personal transformation, stepping away from decades spent trying to fit an image other people had built for her, and finally settling into a version of herself she actually recognizes. Getting back to work. Despite everything unfolding around her, Gilbert has returned to her role as Chief Creative Officer of Modern Prairie, a lifestyle brand and online community she founded for women over 50. She'd stepped back from the brand for a period to focus on her family, but returned publicly in February 2026, just days after Busfield's indictment, with an emotional video message to the community. In that message, she explained that the time away had been necessary, a chance to be present for her family and to find her footing during an unusually difficult stretch. She thanked her audience for what she described as a steady, supportive presence even during her silence, and framed her return to work not as a distraction from her family's situation but as something that helps ground her, a reminder, in her words, of who she is beyond the hardest days. A fight against the disease that took Michael Landon. Gilbert has also devoted recent energy to a cause with deep personal roots, pancreatic cancer research and awareness. The disease killed her Little House on the Prairie co-star Michael Landon in 1991, when he was only 54. In December 2025, she partnered publicly with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, framing the work as a way to channel grief into something productive. She's also lost her friend Patrick Swayze to the same disease, and has spoken about how devastating Landon's diagnosis was for her personally, compounded by the fact that she had already lost her own father to suicide at age 11, meaning Landon's illness meant confronting the possible loss of another major father figure in her life. She's continued to push for greater awareness of the disease's low survival rate, pointing to how difficult it is to detect early and how quickly it tends to progress once found. Where things stand. Gilbert's life at 62 defies easy summary. She's publicly defending a husband facing serious criminal charges while acknowledging that the relationship, career, and future they'd planned together may never be fully recoverable. She's lost a steady TV role under circumstances she can't fully explain. She's uprooted her New York City life to consolidate around the Catskills home that has represented, for years, her attempt at a quieter, more authentic existence. And in the middle of all of it, she's found 2 living brothers she never knew she had, plus a third whose existence she learned of only after he was already gone. She's continued showing up for her lifestyle brand and for pancreatic cancer advocacy even as her personal life has become the subject of national attention again, decades after she first became famous as a child. As she put it in reflecting on the family discovery alone, life keeps finding new ways to surprise her, even now.